Authority, real versus artificial. Welcome to episode 2 of Liberty and Morality Defined. Screw authority, people like to say. Stick it to the man. But stick it to who? Government? Businesses? Military? And why? What is this authority? Where does it come from? Which authorities? And why are people so ready to just screw authority? Authority is often defined as the power to determine or otherwise settle issues and disputes, some sort of a claim on jurisdiction, the right to control or command or determine property ownership, a power or right delegated or given, a person or body of persons in whom authority is often placed, usually government agencies of sorts. Also, persons having legal power in various aspects, often voted on or appointed to enforce laws. And, as this particular dictionary.com reference states, an expert on a subject. But one of these is not like the others. Experts are not like the others. They're based on different criteria, voluntary educations and interactions typically, or experiences. And that makes them a little different than the other examples. But where does this power come from? Where do these rights to delegate anything come from for any of the aforementioned examples? Is all authority bad? Is it neutral? Can authority be good? Well, authority can be broken down into two separate groups. You have unwarranted coercive authority, and you have voluntary interactions. Now, coercive-based authority is usually fear of negative consequences for disagreement or non-compliance. Now, this coercive authority is typically based on fear. Well, fear, it can be justly imposed fear, or it can be unjustly imposed fear. Now, if it's justly imposed fear, then that would mean it would be something along the lines of in your self-defense. So you can be an authority to somebody by being able to make them afraid of you because they did something to violate your consent to being interacted with. That makes you an authority to them, even if it's just for a short time, because their life or reputation or whatever is currently in your hands. But for this particular episode, we're just going to discuss negative authority, unwarranted, coercive-based authority, such as government. And government are nothing but penalties for non-compliance for victimless and victim-engaged interactions. In other words, you obey or you risk being killed to set an example for others. A rule of law is basically this. It's the implementation of fear to quell, but not necessarily extinguish, the fears that you may have, or that those who support government may have, to extinguish, or to quell the fears of things other people may or may not do with their unfettered freedom. In other words, rule of law is a set of negative consequences. If X happens by somebody else, then they must have Y done to them. But this set of negative consequences is proactive. In other words, it's holding people in contempt for things that they have not done, things that they are capable of doing, but not necessarily guaranteed to do. So it's fear of a negative consequence, and that makes government, or those who perpetuate rule of law and uphold these rules and laws, it makes them an authority based on unwarranted, unjust fear. Now, that makes them that makes what they're doing based on unwarranted fear because of taxation, because they are going to claim the right to tax and to press the issue of that taxation by kidnapping people, ultimately putting them into jail if for non-compliance. And if there's resistance there, then they will take these people and say, okay, well, this is the rule of the law. I'm the authority, I work for the authority. I'm going to consider your actions to not cooperate for this supposed greater good as you attacking me, and I'm going to decide that I'm going to kill you in my own self-defense. And that's negative authority right there. Now, this source of fear from which all government authority is derived, it is not necessary, but it is what we put up with every day. Now, if you recall, in Morality Defined, I explained that it is an immoral act to violate somebody's consent to be interacted with. We don't have but one right, and that is the right to life. But it is only recognized by individuals who understand the foundation of morality, the amoral foundation of morality, which basically is the non-aggression principle. You place value or recognize value on your life, you want that respected. Somebody else has value on their life, and they want that respected. Then, the two of you get together and figure out that you both have placed value on your individual lives, you both want that respected, so you agree to respect it so that you don't have to worry about fighting one another. That's the basis of the non-aggression principle, and the only right that you get out of that is the right to your own lives. That's it. You get nothing else. So, you have the one right, and with that right comes the right to respect or have your consent respected. Unfortunately, government violates that and uses fear of negative consequence to make itself an authority. Failure to comply, again, equals additional property theft, fines on top of the original taxes. Resistance equals escalation to kidnapping, jail time. Further resistance to jail time equals the law enforcement officer's escalation of the situation in name of their own self-defense to justify killing the resistors. And this scenario plays out true for all failures to obey rule of law, regardless of the severity of the crime or violation of the legality. And that's what happens. People don't think of it like that, but just go ahead and try not paying those taxes eventually, especially if you make a lot of money and you don't abide by those taxes, those tax laws. You just wait and see what happens. Wesley Snipes is a perfect example of that. He didn't go to jail because he did anything horrendous. He went to jail a few years ago because he didn't pay his taxes. That's what happened. And he had a chunk of money that he didn't pay the authorities, the fear-based authorities. Now, there's something else here. This whole idea of fear-based, this negative authority here, it just doesn't stop there with taxes. It permeates even more parts of our lives and is dangerous beyond just non-compliance. Because if you do comply, then there's a good chance that you might end up being drafted. Real authority, or this negative authority, it's just a snowball effect for those who want to be in power and control. The more you comply, the more power and control that they have, and the less valuable your life becomes. So these individuals, they'll draft a bunch of people and send them off to die, and before you know it, you're in combat. You're supposed to be climbing over trenches. You're going to be walking into a hail of machine gun bullets. Absolute obedience to this kind of authority gets men killed by the hundreds and thousands. Trench warfare saw to that in World War I. Previous wars, where men stood in lines to be shot at, saw to that. Storming the beaches in World War II saw to that. And even the American Civil War, that most people, that's what they like to call it, but it was really a war of federal aggression, that saw to it too. Draft riots in New York City in 1862 or 63, because people didn't want to go fight. They didn't want to be forced into it. Yet rule of law dictated that they had to pick up a musket and go march or face jail time or possibly be killed by their own men and women who are upholding the law back home. That's ridiculous. That's what negative authority does to people. But it's not just that. People try to perpetuate this. If you recall, in the previous episode, I discussed a little bit about how people like to use violent and aggressive language. They do this and they try to make it so that individuals are insecure in their own minds to try to claim some sort of a victory, to make them cow to it. If you also recall, in one of the examples I used, there was an individual and he made some derogatory statements, and it's like, in the effect of that, what he's basically saying when you're making a derogatory statement to acquire some sort of authority, usually authority through fear of being ridiculed, is, oh, so-and-so said something nasty about my character, and they used harsh, foul language. Oh, I should just be grateful that he's not escalating this to physical violence, and I'll just let him say he was right and follow his directives. That's all it amounts to, negative authority, fear-based authority. That's what it is, and it's unnecessary. It's absolutely nasty, and it's uncalled for. So, but that's not all that negative authority is limited to. Government is not the only entity that employs this. Religions employ this too, or employ this. Religions have penalties of negative afterlife effects. If you don't do what the religious authorities say, then they're going to fearmonger you into having a nasty eternity. Not all religions do this, but a lot of them do. Also, you might be physically disassociated with. You might not be able to come onto church property anymore, despite the fact that you haven't really technically done anything wrong. You just not following their every whim and desire. And not every religion is like that. A lot of them have changed. So many of them are still that way. At the very least, you're still going to go to hell if you don't abide by it. But it's kind of interesting that, like government, or unlike government, they're going to threaten you that something bad's going to happen to you if you don't do X, Y, and Z. But that's for you to judge. I'm not interested in being threatened to comply or to change my behavior. I'm more interested in being reasoned with. You show me the negative effect of it, and that will give me a stronger reason why I should listen to you in the first place. And that's actually what leads up to, guess what? Voluntary authority. Now, this is a lesser thought about kind of authority. This is not the kind of authority that people are typically saying, oh, screw the government, or screw the man. No, this is the authority where there is a kind of a blind or an unseen relationship between businesses and government. Now, these relationships often end up with the businesses turning into corporations. They're just big businesses, or any size business really, that has special rules applied to it so that it's not entirely responsible for everything that it does. Now, this is the confusion here with voluntary authority and fear-based authority. Voluntary authorities are supposed to be that which respect consent. Well, if you are respecting the consent of those you're interacting with, well, what's going to happen is you're going to end up having more interactions with that individual, okay? You're going to eventually be respecting each other's boundaries. You're going to respect each other's property. You're going to engage in even more exchanges, and you might even become friends. If not, at least consider whoever you're interacting with, particularly if it is a producer of a good service or idea that you really, really find value in. You're going to look to that individual as a bit of an authority, a leader, if you will. Well, that is good authority. It's also neutral authority, but it is good authority. And this is what so many individuals, usually those anarcho-communists and their exploitations of means of production, get into about. I'm not going to get into all the specifics of that in this episode. Perhaps I'll save that for a later episode. And you can look it up on your own. So I have faith that you're able to do that. But this whole idea that individuals have to buck authority at every turn is just a bad message, because they don't take to the time to actually understand the differences between the authorities that they're going after. Any authority that is based on the respect of the non-aggression principle, or respect of consent to being interacted with, as I've been explaining it more frequently, any authority based on that is just, is voluntary, and is real authority, because it's not coercing anybody to follow it. It's based on reputation, built on that consent to being interacted with, and that is important. And that is why governments so often try to get involved with businesses, because you can only have so much authority with fear-based tactics before you start to fall apart, and you can only control so much. So governments get into relationships with businesses and try to spread their message. Okay, well, I'll give you special protections, but you have to do a little bit of this. I'll give you a pass on the rules, but you have to do this. And it's not that it's being set that way in government rule books, but it's more of a sleight of hand, backroom deal. This lobbyist got this for his business, this lobbyist got that for her business, and that's kind of the way it works. It's really rare to find a law on the books that specifically just gives one industry carte blanche authority to do X, Y, or Z. It's not unheard of. So is the case with, car insurance and now health insurance, where it's mandatory to have it, otherwise you can't drive. And that's an example there. Now, I don't put my seatbelt on because I'm afraid that the police officer is going to pull me over. The law enforcement agent is going to pull me over. No, I put on a seatbelt because I understand that the automobile makers have produced a safety device that is guaranteed to help me survive an automobile accident. But government comes along, and if you don't wear that, then we're going to extort you for additional revenue. That's ridiculous. That's fear-based authority, and that's not the type of authority that I want to be a part of. Now, I also will buy automobile insurance, and I will maintain it, because I want to be covered in case my vehicle is destroyed or lost. So I don't need government to tell me that. But if I don't actually have that insurance and I'm responsible for hurting somebody else, then it's on me. And then you can go through the court system and then garnish my wages or do whatever is necessary in order for me to pay for that. Ultimately, I put myself at risk of being somebody's indentured servant until I have made amends in full, if it's even possible, or depending whatever the outcome is, the determined arbitration outcome. So that's why government, it tries to get involved. Oh, well, we're going to make sure people have this so that you're safer. We're going to make sure people have this so you're safer. Now we're going to make sure people have health insurance so you're covered. Well, no. That's still fear-based. It's still fear-based. So if you don't purchase health insurance and you're generally healthy, what's the point of having the health insurance if you are willing to take that risk? Not everybody needs the health insurance, so they're going to penalize people for not having something. And that is negative authority. But positive authority is one of those insurance companies saying, hey, look, guess what? If you do this, if you give us X amount of dollars each month, we will send you, not only will we send you literature on how to maintain your health, but we will cover certain things, and we will actually lower how much we request of you if you follow these guidelines in the literature that we send you. So if you do this, if you don't smoke, if you don't drink regularly, if you or overdrink and get drunk just to get drunk, if you maintain a healthy living environment, if you maintain a clean living environment, if you eat clean and healthy food and you don't eat junk food or things like that on a regular basis, we'll lower the amount that we require. That's real authority. And that is something that so many people fail to recognize. Yes, insurance companies are in the business to make money, absolutely. And there is nothing wrong with that. But the negative aspect of this comes when it's forced on people. When these organizations get in bed with the organization or an organization that sees fit to extort other individuals, like government does. And that is not okay. So it blurs the lines between real authority, voluntarily based, respect-based authority, and unnecessary, unwarranted, fear-based, unwarranted, coercion-based authority. So those are things that need to be understood and looked at before we just go around saying, screw authority, because that's not helpful to anybody. Just going out there and telling people, I'm going to buck the system. Well, okay, but if you don't know what you're fighting, and you don't know why you're fighting, and if you don't take the time to understand those things, you're going to have a bad time. It's not going to turn out well. You can't just go out there and destroy stuff. The whole authority thing, and this is something that just I don't understand why people don't take the time to learn these things. It's not a difficult concept to learn, but I think perhaps there might be an emotional shock value to it. Something along the lines of, well, it's a radical statement, it's an emotionally charged statement, and it gets people to listen because they understand that the problem is those people who are trying to claim authority over them, but they don't understand that the problem with those individuals is that they're using the good authority to empower themselves over them. That's the issue. So if you don't recognize good authority from bad authority, legitimate authority from illegitimate authority, then we're never going to be able to have a successful revolution. And that successful revolution, in part, starts in your head understanding the difference between legitimate authority and illegitimate authority. That concludes this episode of Liberty and Morality Defined. A little bit shorter than the rest of them, but nevertheless, an episode that I felt was necessary after listening to a number of other podcasts and reading a number of other articles. If you've enjoyed this, please visit my website, www.jimlimberdavis.com. Maybe donate a little bit, poke around, read some of the other things that I've written. Join me on Facebook.com/LibertyDefined. If you have any questions, send them to me there, or hit me up on Twitter @JimLimberDavis. And look forward to speaking with you next time. Thank you.